The heart is the muscular pump that sits at the centre of our circulatory system. It's responsible for producing most of the pressure driving blood through our arteries and veins and is thus vital to life. The heart is actually considered to consist of two independent pumps separated by a central septum. The right pump takes deoxygenated blood from the body and pushes it to the lungs. And the left pump takes oxygenated blood from the lungs and sends it back to the rest of the body. Today we're going to look at the detailed anatomy of the chambers of the heart and see how this relates to their functions. My name's Conor, and welcome to More Than Skin Deep. Before we get going, let's just clarify some terminology I'll be using. While most textbooks broadly agree on how to describe the anatomy of the heart, there's some contention when it comes to certain words. First of all, there's a general shift away from using Latin and Greek names for parts of the heart, and instead to use names based on the English language. This means certain texts will use terms such as superior cable vein instead of superior vena cava, for example. For this tutorial, I'll mostly be using the traditional terminology, but you'll see the alternative terms coming up underneath so you can learn them too. Secondly, the actual ways to define certain parts of the internal heart are also in debate. For example, how many parts of the right atrium are there? Most of the time I'd just split the difference and go with the general consensus, but with the heart I think it's important to pick a side. For this reason, when there's disagreement in the literature, I've defaulted to the descriptions used in the 4th edition of Anderson's Pediatric Cardiology, as this is the text that's used at my institution and is generally considered one of the more modern sources based on currently emerging data. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get in and learn some anatomy. Each side of the heart consists of two chambers, the atria and the ventricles. Let's start by examining the right atrium. The right atrium is the chamber into which all venous blood will eventually drain. This blood arrives primarily via the superior vena cava, which enters the right atrium through its roof, and the inferior vena cava, which enters via the floor. From the outside, the right atrium forms most of the right side of the heart. It has a large muscular protuberance that extends anteriorly, known as the right atrial appendage, or right auricle. Here I'm actually going to use the newer term, appendage. This structure acts to increase the capacity of the right atrium. Another important external feature to note is a shallow indent on its posterior surface known as the sulcus terminalis. This corresponds with the crista terminalis on its internal surface. Okay, now let's look inside the right atrium. The best way to view it is from the right pulmonary surface, accessed by an incision like this. We'll cut here and reflect the right atrial appendage backwards. The first thing to note is that the internal right atrium is broadly split into 5 parts: the smooth-walled sinus venarum, the septal surface, the atrial body, the right atrial appendage, and the vestibule of the tricuspid valve. The division between the sinus venarum and atrial appendage is known as the crista terminalis, and corresponds with the sulcus terminalis, which we mentioned earlier. As well as systemic venous blood entering via the vena cavae, blood from the heart muscle itself drains into the right atrium via the coronary sinus. The opening of the coronary sinus lies between the entrance of the inferior vena cava and the tricuspid valve. The superior vena cava has no valves, and its drainage is purely gravity assisted. The inferior vena cava, on the other hand, has a small flap of tissue in the floor of the right atrium known as the eustachian valve. This is important in directing blood during fetal life, but is less useful in adults. There's also a small, simple valve at the opening of the coronary sinus known as the Thebesian valve. The eustachian valve can be seen to extend anteriorly a short distance in a fibrous strand known as the tendon of Todaro. This structure forms part of the triangle of Koch, the apex of which is used to locate the atrial ventricular node. We'll cover this more in a later video. From the crista terminalis arises several muscular projections known as the pectinate muscles. These extend towards the tip of the right atrial appendage and give it its rough trabeculated appearance. The largest of the pectinate muscles is known as the tinea sagittalis, or second crest. The smooth septal wall separates the right and left atria. Very noticeable on this wall is the indented fossa ovalis, which is the remnant of part of the foramen ovale, which allows blood to pass directly into the systemic circulation during fetal life. All blood entering the adult right atrium must leave this chamber via the tricuspid valve. This gets its name as it has 3 leaflets, one anterosuperior, one inferior, and one septal. The anterosuperior leaflet is the largest. The leaflets are anchored to the outflow part of the right atrium via a fibrous ring and join one another at regions known as commissures. Each leaflet is attached on its ventricular side to a string of fibrous connective tissue known as a chorda tendina, or tendinous cord. These chordae go on to attach mostly to the papillary muscles, which we'll cover in a minute. Okay, let's move on to the right ventricle. From the outside, the right ventricle forms most of the anterior heart and extends almost to the apex. To view the internal surface of the right ventricle, we'll view the heart from this orientation and make an incision like this. We can then reflect the wall of the right atrium downwards, as shown. On the internal surface, we can see that the right ventricle can be divided into 3 parts. These are the inlet, the roughly tuberculated apical part, and the outlet, which is a smooth muscular sleeve known as the pulmonary infundibulum. The inlet and infundibulum are separated by the thick supraventricular crest, which goes from the anterosuperior leaflet of the tricuspid valve to the anterior wall of the right ventricle and is continuous with a structure known as the septomarginal trabeculation. The inflow and apical parts of the right ventricle are complex and vary a lot between people, but in all cases they're covered by a series of muscular projections known as the trabeculae carnae. These can be split into ridges, which run along the sides of the ventricles, bridges, which span from wall to wall, and papillary muscles, which attach to the chordae tendineae to prevent the valve from prolapsing. The most significant and consistent of the bridges is the moderator band, which arises from the septomarginal trabeculation to support the base of the anterior papillary muscle. There are 3 major papillary muscles in the right ventricle. The anterior papillary muscle attaches to the anterosuperior tricuspid leaflet, the inferior papillary muscle to the inferior and septal leaflets, and the medial papillary muscle, or muscle of Lankesi, to the septal leaflet. The anterior papillary muscle is by far the largest, and the muscle of Lankesi is the smallest. One unique feature of the right ventricle is a group of chordae tendineae which attach the septal leaflet directly to the interventricular septum. This is not seen in the left ventricle, and thus the tricuspid valve can be described as septophilic, unlike the septophobic mitral valve. The smooth infundibulum ends at the pulmonary valve, through which blood leaves the heart to enter the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary valve, like the tricuspid, has 3 leaflets. These are the anterior, left, and right leaflets. Unlike the neat circular fibrous ring of the tricuspid valve, the pulmonary valve leaflets are semi-lunar in shape and touch at their zones of apposition when the valve is closed. The tip of each of these free edges is thickened and produces a small nodule. Okay, that covers the key features of the right heart. Now let's look at the left side. This has some similarities to the right, but with several key differences. The left atrium forms most of the base of the heart and receives oxygenated blood directly from the lungs via the 4 paired pulmonary veins. The volume of the left atrium is slightly smaller than the right, but its walls are much thicker and more muscular, owing to the higher pressures required to push blood around the systemic circulation. Like the right, the left atrium also has an anterior muscular pouch known as the left atrial appendage, or left auricle. However, the left atrial appendage is narrower and more tubular than the broad-based right appendage. Let's have a look inside the left atrium. The best angle to view it from is the left pulmonary surface. We'll make an incision like this and reflect the left atrial appendage and part of the heart base backwards. The left atrium can again be divided into 5 parts, although there's no crista terminalis, so the distinction is less clear. It has a smooth venous component, where the pulmonary veins enter, a septal part, a body, an atrial appendage, and a mitral vestibule. The septal wall of the left atrium is a little rougher than the right atrium, and contains the valve of the foramen ovale, which closes in early life. Generally speaking, the mitral valve has a similar structure to the tricuspid valve, although it consists of only 2 valve leaflets, one aortic and one mural. Its orifice is smaller than that of the tricuspid valve. As with the tricuspid valve, a chorda tendina extends from each mitral leaflet to its respective papillary muscle, helping to prevent prolapse. Similar to the left atrium, the left ventricle has a thick wall which allows it to create very high pumping pressures during contraction. It extends all the way to the apex of the heart and composes part of the anterior, left pulmonary and diaphragmatic surfaces of the heart. It's hard to get a good view of the inside of the left ventricle, but the best angle to take is actually the same as for the left atrium, looking mostly at the heart's left pulmonary surface. We'll make an incision here and reflect the muscular wall upwards. Like the right ventricle, the left has an inflow portion, a trabeculated apical portion, and a smooth outflow tract that guards the aortic valve. The structure of these is fairly similar to the right, but again emits a clear division like the supraventricular crest. Another difference in the left ventricle is in the structure of its apical trabeculations. Compared to the right side, the trabeculations of the left ventricle are fine and more intricate. This can be used to distinguish between the left and right sides of the heart in embryonic studies and pediatric echocardiography. There are two main papillary muscles in the left ventricle, one from its superior lateral surface and one from its inferior septal surface. All blood leaving the left ventricle does so via the aortic valve. The structure of this valve is similar to the pulmonary valve, with a posterior, left and right leaflet, all of which touch at their free edges to prevent backflow of blood. From the sinuses of the right and left aortic leaflets arise the right and left coronary arteries, respectively. This leads to these leaflets sometimes being termed the right and left coronary leaflets, with the posterior being the only non-coronary leaflet. Important to remember is that the aortic and mitral valve skeletons are in close contact and are in fibrous continuity via the subaortic curtain. This feature is not present on the right side. Okay, we're nearly done. The last structure we should examine on the internal heart is the septum between the two ventricles. This is known as the interventricular septum, and it's composed of two main parts, the muscular septum and the membranous septum. The muscular part forms most of the interventricular septum and is the bit closest to the apex, with the membranous part being thinner and closer to the atria. Some texts consider there to be a third atrioventricular part which sits just above the septal cusp of the tricuspid valve. The cardiac conduction system passes directly through this interventricular septum on its way towards the apex. Okay, there we go. That's everything there is to say about the chambers of the heart. If you want to keep learning about the heart, we have videos on the surfaces, great vessels, and much more already in our catalogue. If you got something out of this, please consider subscribing. It shows us that our work is appreciated and means you get notified of our newest videos as they're released. In the meantime, I hope you learned something and have a great day.